The planet Zithera had never been kind to anyone. Its jagged mountains pierced the sky like frozen teeth, and the red desert stretched farther than the eye could see. Windstorms rose without warning, whipping sand and rocks across the barren plains. It was a world built for survival where only the strong endured. And yet, despite its cruelty, it had drawn Captain Marcus Hale, one of humanity's finest soldiers, to its surface. Marcus crouched behind a jagged boulder, his pulse steady but alert. Around him, the sounds of war had dimmed, but the tension never left. Human forces and the Xylar, a proud alien race with scales like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed like molten gold, had been fighting for months. Marcus' squad had been assigned a reconnaissance mission, but intelligence had brought them too close to the front lines. Through the dusty wind, Marcus spotted a figure moving awkwardly. At first he thought it was a Xylar soldier, but something about the way it stumbled caught his attention. He signaled to his squad, "Wait, that one, it's not moving like a fighter." As he moved closer, careful to remain unseen, the figure revealed itself. Queen Elyara, the Xylar leader. She was young for her species, her armor cracked, her scales dulled with blood and dust. She had been hit by human artillery, and yet somehow she still tried to crawl forward. Her servants lay dead around her, and her guards had been taken down in the chaos. Marcus' mind raced. He had orders: protect his squad, eliminate threats, and gather intelligence. Capturing or killing the queen could bring an end to this war, or at least give humanity an advantage. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something unexpected: fear, pain, and trust. Instinct took over. Marcus dropped his rifle and sprinted across the open sand, ignoring the shouts of his squad behind him. The sand burned his boots, and the wind tore at his uniform, but nothing mattered more than the fragile life in front of him. He reached her, gently lifting her in his arms. "She's heavy," muttered Lieutenant Perez, catching up, his voice a mix of awe and frustration. "Captain, what are you doing?" Marcus' jaw tightened. "Saving her. We'll figure out the rest later." And so he began the grueling journey. 30 miles of unforgiving terrain lay ahead, and he had only his strength and wits to rely on. Each step was a test, his muscles screaming with every movement, but he refused to falter. The first obstacle came swiftly. A group of Xylar scouts, unaware of his intentions, appeared on the ridge above. Marcus froze. One wrong move and they could see him as an enemy. But then he remembered an old human tactic: distraction. He grabbed a rock and hurled it into a nearby ravine. The echo drew their attention, and Marcus crept along a hidden path, using the terrain to his advantage. The scouts called out, confused, but Marcus was already gone, disappearing into a narrow canyon. By midday, the sun scorched his back. Elyara stirred slightly in his arms, groaning. "Stay with me," Marcus whispered. "We're not far yet." She opened her eyes weakly, the golden glow dim but still mesmerizing. For a brief moment, Marcus felt the weight of history in his hands, not just her life, but the potential for peace or destruction between their species. Hours passed. He navigated sandstorms, jagged cliffs, and the occasional wild creature that prowled Zithera's deserts. He used everything he had learned in training, keeping low, moving silently, and thinking ahead. Despite the pain in his arms and the exhaustion pulling at him, he refused to rest until he found safety. At night, the temperature dropped sharply. Marcus wrapped Elyara in a spare blanket, pressing his own body against hers for warmth. She shivered, and he could feel her fragile heartbeat against his chest. He whispered stories about Earth, his childhood, and humanity's endless struggle to survive. It was strange, telling an enemy about home, yet it felt necessary, grounding him amidst the chaos. Why are you helping me?" Elyara asked faintly, her voice barely audible. Marcus didn't look at her. "Because it's the right thing to do, because no one should die alone." She said nothing after that, but her eyes softened, and for the first time Marcus felt a connection beyond the battlefield. In the silence of the desert night, the distance between human and Xyler seemed smaller than ever. Days passed, or was it hours? Time had lost meaning. Marcus' supplies ran low. His squad had tried to send backup, but the rough terrain and enemy patrols made rescue impossible. All he had was determination and the fragile life in his arms. Then came the worst challenge, the Razor Cliffs. A sheer drop of hundreds of feet, the only path forward a narrow ledge barely wide enough for a human to walk. Marcus' arms ached, and he could feel Elyara slipping with each step. He gritted his teeth, balancing them carefully, one slow step at a time. Below, the rocks promised a fall that neither would survive. Halfway across, a sudden tremor shook the cliffside. Rocks tumbled and Marcus lost his footing briefly. He held her tighter, muttering, "Not today, not now." "We're making it." Sweat mixed with blood, his vision blurred, but he continued, step by careful step, until they finally reached the other side. When he collapsed afterward, it was both relief and exhaustion that overtook him. Elyara's golden eyes, dim but alive, looked up at him. She whispered, "You saved me." Marcus simply nodded, too tired for words. He had carried an enemy across 30 miles of hellish terrain, risking everything. And in doing so, he had shown the most human quality of all, compassion. By morning, they reached the human forward base. Medical teams rushed to Elyara, astonished that she had survived the journey. Marcus handed her over, his uniform torn, his muscles sore, but his spirit unbroken. The commanders stared at him in disbelief. "Captain, why?" one of them asked. Marcus shrugged. "She's alive, that's reason enough." And somewhere deep in the hospital tent, as Elyara received care, she looked at him. Not with fear, not with hatred, but with a quiet acknowledgement. He had risked everything for her, and she would not forget it. Little did Marcus know, this single act of courage and mercy would ripple across worlds, changing the course of history. For the Xyler Queen, saved by a human, now harbored thoughts that went far beyond gratitude. And as Marcus left the base to rest, unaware of the destiny he had set in motion, Elyara's gaze lingered on him, full of a promise yet unspoken. The Xyler Palace rose like a crown over the desert city, its black spires reflecting the sun in sharp, dazzling points. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. The court whispered in low tones, their scales gleaming in the flickering torchlight. Queen Elyara lay on a raised platform in her chamber, bandaged and recovering from the wounds that had nearly killed her. Despite the pain, her golden eyes never left the door, alert for any sign of the human who had carried her through 30 miles of deadly terrain. Marcus Hale had been escorted into the palace under strict guard. He was tired, sore, and unsure of what awaited him. The humans had no permanent base near the city, and he had been warned that the Xyler were proud and distrustful. Every step he took was watched, every breath measured. When he entered the chamber, Elyara's gaze met his. The firelight caught the edges of her scales, making her appear both regal and vulnerable at once. Marcus felt an odd mixture of awe and relief. She was alive. She was breathing. She had trusted him, and now, despite being their enemy, he was standing before her. "You risked everything for me," Elyara said quietly, her voice still weak but steady. "Why?" Marcus lowered his eyes respectfully. "Because it was right. Because no one should die alone, even an enemy." The room was silent. Her advisors, towering Xyler generals and ministers, exchanged looks. Some scowled, seeing a human in the royal chamber as a threat. Others were thoughtful, recognizing the courage it took to act with such honor. Elyara's words cut through the tension like a blade. "I am alive because of him," she said firmly, "and I will not forget it." A murmur ran through the chamber, but no one dared contradict the queen. She gestured for Marcus to approach. Hesitantly, he stepped closer. Her injuries were severe, and he noticed the fine tremor in her claws as she tried to sit up. "You will need rest," Marcus said. "Your strength won't return without it." "I cannot rest while my people suffer," Elyara replied. "Yet, I owe you a debt I do not know how to repay." Marcus shook his head. "There's no debt, just make sure you survive, that's enough." Days passed, and Marcus remained in the palace, both a guest and an observer. He learned more about Xylar society in that time than any human diplomat could have taught him in years. The Xylar were disciplined, proud, and deeply loyal to their queen, but their customs were strict. Marcus noticed subtle tensions among the ministers and generals. Some feared that his presence would weaken the queen's authority. Elyara, recovering from her injuries, began to speak more with him privately. She asked questions about humanity, about how Marcus people fought wars, how they lived, and how they survived against impossible odds. He answered honestly, sharing stories of Earth, of human ingenuity and compassion, of sacrifices made for strangers and friends alike. "You see the world differently," she said one evening, watching him explain a strategy humans had used in an earlier campaign. "Your methods are clever. You do not rely solely on strength." Marcus smiled faintly. "Humans survive by thinking, by adapting. Strength alone rarely wins a war. It's what you do with your strength that matters." For the first time, Elyara felt a connection she had never known with a human. His courage had saved her life, yes, but it was his mind, his empathy, and his honor that drew her respect. Slowly, admiration grew into curiosity, and curiosity into something deeper she had not expected. However, not everyone in the court was pleased. One of Elyara's generals, Kael'tris, whispered among the others, his eyes narrow and calculating. "The human is clever, yes, but he is dangerous. Trusting him could cost us everything." Kael'tris' faction began plotting in secret, hoping to remove Marcus before he could influence the queen. Their first attempt was subtle, a poisoned meal intended to test Marcus' vigilance. But Marcus, careful and observant, noticed the faint discoloration in the food and refused it. Elyara, noticing his caution, raised an eyebrow. "You are always alert, even here." "Why?" Marcus shrugged. "Because danger follows those who act with honor. And because I am not invincible." She smiled faintly, a gesture that warmed Marcus in ways he did not fully understand. There was trust between them now, fragile but real. The real test came when the rebels made their move. One night, as a storm of wind and sand lashed the palace, Kael'tris and a small force of soldiers attempted to breach Elyara's chamber. Marcus was nearby, having insisted on staying close in case of trouble. The attack was swift, silent, and deadly. Marcus reacted instinctively. Using his human training, he created diversions, blocked corridors, and led Elyara to a hidden passage he had discovered while learning the palace layout. He moved with precision, his mind calculating every step, every angle, every escape route. "You trust me?" Marcus asked as they ran through the narrow corridors. Elyara nodded. "I do. I have no choice but to trust you." Together they navigated the storm-swept halls, evading Kael'tris' men. Marcus' strength and intelligence, combined with Elyara's knowledge of the palace, allowed them to survive the attack unharmed. When they reached the inner sanctum, Elyara faced Marcus fully. "You saved my life again," she said, her voice steady, her eyes glowing with a mix of gratitude and something else, something more personal. Marcus looked away, feeling the weight of her gaze. "I told you, it's what any human would do. But I also know that I cannot stay here forever. Your people need their queen." Elyara stepped closer. "I do not want you to leave, not yet, not ever." The words surprised Marcus. In all his years of service, he had never been spoken to like this, never by an enemy, never with such honesty. The connection between them deepened, not through political duty, but through shared experience, mutual respect, and the knowledge that each had risked everything for the other. Over the following days, their bond grew. Elyara listened intently to Marcus, accounts of Earth, of human history and philosophy. He taught her strategies for leadership, emphasizing adaptability, empathy, and the importance of understanding one's enemies. She, in turn, shared Xylar customs, stories of her ancestors, and lessons in diplomacy and survival. It was a rare partnership, one built on trust, intellect, and shared respect. They laughed quietly when discussing strange cultural differences, argued over tactics and ideas, and found comfort in each other's presence. The bond was subtle, a thread that wove through their conversations, their actions, and their glances. Yet Kael'tris' threat was not gone. The rebels grew bolder, attempting smaller strikes and tests, hoping to force Marcus out or turn Elyara against him. Each time, Marcus used human ingenuity to counter their plans, often turning the attempts into lessons for the Queen. She began to see not just his courage, but the remarkable value of his thinking. Humanity, she realized, was not simply a species of brawn. They were clever, adaptable, and capable of deep moral action. One evening, as the sun set over the desert city, casting the palace in shades of gold and crimson, Elyara approached Marcus. "You've changed the way I see your people," she said softly. "Not all humans are enemies. Some are capable of honor, courage, and compassion beyond measure." Marcus looked down, humbled. "I hope that's true. I hope it is enough to build something better between our species." Elyara's eyes lingered on him, thoughtful and intense. "It is. And perhaps, for me, it is enough to build something even more personal." Marcus met her gaze, understanding the unspoken words. The bond between them had grown beyond survival, beyond duty, beyond politics. It was something rare, something profound, born from mutual respect, shared danger, and unwavering courage. As night fell, the palace quiet except for the distant hum of the desert wind, Marcus and Elyara stood side by side, knowing that challenges were far from over. Yet, for the first time, both felt hope, not just for survival, but for the possibility of unity, trust, and perhaps even love between human and Xylar. The story of the human who had carried a queen across 30 miles of deadly terrain was no longer just a tale of courage. It was a story of connection, of respect, and of a bond that could reshape the fate of worlds. And somewhere deep in the shadows, Kael'tris plotted still, unaware that the strength of trust, honor, and human ingenuity would soon prove far stronger than any force of rebellion. The sun rose over Xylar City, painting the black spires of the palace in golden light. The desert winds carried a quiet tension. Everyone knew that Kael'tris' rebellion had not ended with the last failed strike. Marcus Hale, the human soldier who had carried the queen across 30 miles of peril, now walked the palace halls with purpose. He was no longer just a guest. He was a symbol, a living proof that honor and courage could transcend enemy lines. Queen Elyara, still recovering from her wounds, called him to her chamber. Her golden eyes, steady and strong despite her lingering pain, studied Marcus intently. "Marcus," she began, her voice calm but commanding, "the rebels will strike again. I need a plan, and I need you by my side." Marcus nodded. "I've observed their tactics. They rely on surprise and speed. We can predict their moves if we use what I taught you, human strategy, combined with Xylar intelligence." Elyara smiled faintly, a mixture of trust and admiration in her gaze. "Then we fight together, not just as allies but as partners." The word resonated in Marcus' mind. He had risked everything to save her life, and now he would fight alongside her to protect her people. He was ready. The rebels struck that night, under the cover of darkness. Kael'tris led a group of 20 soldiers, intent on seizing the queen and destabilizing her rule. But Marcus had anticipated the attack. He positioned defensive units along the palace corridors, using knowledge of Xylar patrol patterns and human tactical thinking. As the first rebel broke through the outer defenses, Marcus moved swiftly, intercepting them with precision. He did not kill unnecessarily. His goal was control and protection. Each move was calculated, each step deliberate. The rebels, confident in their assault, found themselves facing obstacles they could not overcome. Elyara, mounted on a swift hover platform, commanded her loyal guards, coordinating with Marcus through hand signals and prearranged signals. Her strength had returned faster than expected, thanks to her determination and the care of her people. Together, they were a formidable force. In the palace courtyard, the final confrontation occurred. Keltris and his remaining soldiers charged, believing they could overwhelm the queen and her human ally. Marcus met them head-on, using a combination of human agility and clever traps. He led the rebels into narrow corridors where their numbers worked against them, cutting off their retreat and minimizing casualties. Elyara arrived just in time to face Keltris himself. Her claws gleamed and her eyes burned with righteous anger. "You will not harm my people or you will face justice," she declared. Keltris sneered, but the confidence in her voice faltered his resolve. Marcus approached Keltris cautiously. "It doesn't have to end in blood," he said calmly. "Step down and your people will live. Continue and you risk everything." Keltris hesitated, seeing the unity and strength between the queen and the human. The defiance in Marcus' eyes, combined with Elyara's authority, was too much to ignore. With a final glance at his followers, he yielded. The rebellion was over. The palace was safe, and the queen's rule remained secure. But more than that, a lesson had been learned. The courage, ingenuity, and morality of one human had shifted the balance of power, not through force alone, but through strategy and honor. In the quiet aftermath, Elyara approached Marcus. The city around them was calm, the storm of battle past. She reached out, her clawed hand touching his arm gently. "You have saved my life more than once," she said. "Not just with strength, but with your mind, your courage, and your heart. I owe you more than gratitude." Marcus felt a warmth he had never known. "You don't owe me anything. I did what I had to do." Elyara's golden eyes softened, and she spoke words that surprised even her. "I do not speak of duty or politics. I speak of choice. I want you to stay, not just as my ally, but as something more, as my mate." The declaration hung in the air. Marcus blinked, unprepared for the depth of her meaning. Humans did not have the same customs as the Xylar, but he understood the gravity of her words. To accept was to honor the bond they had forged through hardship, trust, and shared trials. He looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity and respect there. "Elyara, I've faced death many times, but never have I felt the way I feel standing here with you. If this is your choice, then I will accept. I will stand by your side, not just as a soldier, but as someone who values you, your people, and the hope we can create together." Her eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. The bond between them was sealed, not through ceremony alone, but through mutual respect and understanding. The days that followed were filled with planning and preparation. Marcus and Elyara worked together to strengthen the palace defenses, improve communications between human and Xylar forces, and establish new strategies for coexistence. The people watched, slowly realizing that humans and Xylar could cooperate, not merely coexist. In private moments, Elyara shared her world with Marcus, the rituals of leadership, the history of her ancestors, and the delicate balance of Xylar society. Marcus shared stories of Earth, of human creativity and perseverance, and the lessons he had learned in war and peace. Their bond deepened, growing into a partnership built on respect, admiration, and emerging love. Word of their alliance spread throughout the city and beyond. Some were skeptical, but the demonstration of unity and strength was undeniable. Marcus' courage had not only saved the queen, it had bridged two worlds. One evening, as the twin moons of Zithra rose over the desert horizon, Marcus and Elyara stood together atop the palace spire. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of sand and stone. Below, the city was alive with the quiet energy of a people who had survived chaos and now looked toward hope. "You have changed my world," Elyara said softly. "Not just by saving my life, but by showing me what it means to trust, to fight, and to care beyond duty." Marcus smiled. "We've both changed each other. Your courage saved me from despair as much as my strength saved you from death. Together, we're stronger than either of us alone." Elyara reached for his hand, her scales warm against his skin. "Then let us face the future together, as partners, as allies, and as mates." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight and the wonder of her words. He had carried a queen across 30 miles of danger, facing impossible odds with only his courage and ingenuity. Now he would walk beside her not just as a soldier but as a trusted companion, a symbol of unity, and a living testament to the strength of humanity. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but for the first time, Marcus felt true hope. Hope for a world where humans and Xyler could not only survive together but thrive. Hope for a bond that transcended species, built on trust, respect, and the courage to act when it mattered most. As they stood together, watching the moons rise over the desert city, Marcus knew that the story of their journey, the story of courage, survival, and honor, would be told for generations. Not as a tale of war, but as a testament to the power of compassion, ingenuity, and the unyielding human spirit. The night was calm, the palace secure. Human soldier carried the wounded enemy queen for 30 miles. Now she wanted him as her mate.